The afternoon sun was supposed to be relaxing. For Lin Xiao, a freelance illustrator and single father to 4-year-old Mochi, relaxing was a myth. He was currently juggling a lukewarm latte, a half-broken toy truck, and his ringing phone. "I'm sending the sketches now, I swear," Xiao hissed into his phone, pinning it between his shoulder and ear. He looked up just in time to see Mochi, a whirlwind of energy in a bare-eared hoodie, bolt toward a tall figure standing near the slides. "Mochi, wait, don't run." But Mochi didn't stop. He didn't even slow down. With the predatory precision of a toddler seeking a target, Mochi leaped at the tall man's legs, wrapping his arms around his knees with a joyful shout that silenced the entire playground. "Daddy, I found you. You're back from the moon." The world stopped. The man, dressed in a tailored green sweater that screamed, "expensive," froze. Lin Xiao dropped his phone into the wood chips. Chapter 1. The CEO and the Moon Traveler. Yan Feng was having a terrible Tuesday. As the CEO of Yan Group, his life was a series of spreadsheets, board meetings, and cold espressos. He had stopped by the park for a brief moment of fresh air before a high-stakes merger meeting, mostly to escape his overbearing assistant. Now, a small, sticky human was attached to his leg. "Ah, hey," Yan Feng stammered, his usual icy composure melting into pure confusion. "He's very cute, but I'm fairly certain I haven't been to the moon." Lin Xiao scrambled over, his face a shade of red that would have made a beet jealous. "Mochi, oh my god, I am so sorry." Let go of the nice, very handsome, very expensive-looking stranger. Xiao peeled Mochi off the man's leg. Mochi pouted, big watery eyes looking up at Yan Feng. "But daddy, you have the same watch from my book." Yan Feng looked down at his limited edition Patek Philippe. Then he looked at the flustered man in front of him. Lin Xiao was wearing an oversized hoodie with paint stains, thick-rimmed glasses that were sliding down his nose, and had a look of such genuine panic that Yan Feng found himself intrigued. "It's okay," Yan Feng said, his voice dropping an octave into that smooth, rich tone that makes people buy things they don't need. "Kids have a vivid imagination. I am so sorry." Xiao apologized for the 10th time, bowing so low he almost hit his head on the slide. He's been obsessed with a storybook about a space dad who looks exactly like a model. "I'll just take him and hide under a rock now." "Wait," Yan Feng said, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a silk handkerchief. He knelt, ruining his $1,000 trousers in the dirt, and wiped a smudge of chocolate off Mochi's cheek. "Does Space Dad usually get home in time for dinner?" Mochi nodded vigorously. "He brings star candies." Yan Feng smiled. "A real one, not a press conference one. I'll have to remember that." He stood up, handing a business card to the stunned Lin Xiao. "Your son has excellent taste in watches. If he ever needs another Space Dad for a playground visit, let me know. I think I owe him some star candies for the leg hug." As Yan Feng walked away toward his waiting black sedan, Lin Xiao looked at the card. Yan Feng, Chief Executive Officer, Yan Group. "Mochi," Xiao whispered, staring at the retreating car. "Do you have any idea who you just tackled?" Mochi just hopped up and down. "Daddy's tall. Can we have pizza?" The universe, it seemed, was not content with merely embarrassing Lin Xiao once. It wanted a full-scale comedic tragedy. Chapter 2. The Penthouse and the Peasant. Lin Xiao's apartment building, the Ivy Arch, was a quirky architectural middle ground. The lower floors were occupied by struggling artists and freelance writers like himself. The top 3 floors, however, had recently been renovated into glass-walled penthouses that cost more than Xiao would earn in 3 lifetimes. 2 days after the Space Dad incident, Xiao was wrestling with a mountain of trash bags and a very sleepy Mochi. "Almost there, buddy," Xiao grunted, kicking his front door open. "Just gotta get these to the chute and..." The elevator dinked. Out stepped a man who looked like he had just walked off a runway in Milan. Yan Feng was carrying a single, minimalist designer briefcase. He stopped dead, his eyes traveling from the leaking trash bag in Xiao's hand to Mochi, who was currently wearing a dinosaur onesie. You, Yan Feng said, his eyebrows arching toward his perfectly styled hairline. Me, Xiao squeaked. You live here, in the, I own the sky, floors. I moved in this morning, Yan Feng replied, looking around the hallway with the slight disdain of someone used to marble floors, not faded floral carpet. Mochi's eyes snapped open. Space Daddy. Before Xiao could stop him, the dinosaur-clad toddler had vaulted out of his father's arms and was clinging to Yan Feng's thigh like a koala. Mochi, no, we don't tackle the neighbors. Xiao hissed, frantically trying to pull his son back while also keeping the trash bag from touching Yan Feng's pristine suit. It's fine, Yan Feng said, though he looked remarkably like a man who had never held a child before. He awkwardly patted Mochi's hood. So, we're neighbors. Technically, I'm a floor below you, Xiao corrected, his face heating up. I just use this floor's trash chute because ours is jammed with someone's old mattress. Yan Feng stared at him. The silence stretched. It was the kind of silence that usually preceded a CEO firing a mid-level manager. I don't know how to use the stove, Yan Feng said suddenly. Xiao blinked. What? The induction cooktop in the penthouse, Yan Feng sighed, looking genuinely defeated. The manual is in German. My assistant is off duty, and I haven't eaten since breakfast. I was going to order in, but... He looked at Mochi, then back at Xiao. You look like someone who knows how to operate a kitchen. Chapter 3. The worst first dinner. 10 minutes later, the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate was sitting on a mismatched wooden chair in Lin Xiao's cramped, toy-cluttered kitchen. I'm making Mochi's special, Xiao said, feeling the surreal weight of the situation. Which is just mac and cheese with hot dog slices shaped like octopuses. I hope you're not allergic to childhood. Yan Feng picked up a plastic fork. I haven't had a hot dog since I was 12. As they ate, the tension began to melt, replaced by the chaotic energy of a 4-year-old. Mochi insisted on showing Yan Feng every single one of his drawings. This is a dragon, Mochi explained, pointing to a green scribble. And this is Papa. And this is you. He pointed to a tall, stick-figure man wearing a crown and holding a lightsaber. Yan Feng picked up the drawing, a strange, soft expression crossing his face. Why am I a king? Because you're Space Daddy. Mochi chirped. Papa says you're very important and we shouldn't bother you because you're busy being a big boss. Xiao nearly choked on his macaroni. I just meant a big boss, huh? Yan Feng looked at Xiao, a playful glint in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Is that what you tell him about me? I was trying to explain why you were wearing a suit at a playground. Xiao defended himself, waving a spatula. Most people there are in sweatpants and misery. I like the crown, Yan Feng said, tucking the drawing into his breast pocket. It's an upgrade from my usual board meetings. Just as things were getting cozy, a loud thud echoed from the hallway, followed by the sound of a key scratching at the lock. Xiao, I'm home. Did you save me any? The door swung open to reveal Lu Han, Xiao's best friend and a chaotic theater actor, who froze at the sight of the CEO. Oh, Lu Han said, his eyes widening. I didn't know we were hosting a daddy tonight. Xiao, you didn't tell me you finally got a sugar. Lu Han, shut up. The air in the tiny kitchen turned so cold it could have preserved a side of beef. Lin Xiao felt like he was watching his life flash before his eyes, and it mostly consisted of Lu Han saying the wrong thing at the wrong time. Chapter 4. The Proposal. Yan Feng's fork clattered against the plastic plate. The playful glint in his eyes vanished, replaced by a sharp, calculating stillness that made Lin Xiao realize why this man ran a multi-billion-dollar empire. He didn't just look at people, he deconstructed them. Sugar. Yan Feng repeated the word as if it were a foreign toxin. He's joking. He's a theater actor. He's dramatic. He's currently leaving. Xiao scrambled up, grabbing Lu Han by the collar of his denim jacket and shoving him back toward the hallway. Wait, Xiao, I was just saying he's hot. Like, expensive candle from a boutique. Hot. Lu Han's voice muffled as the door slammed shut. Xiao leaned his forehead against the wood, taking a deep breath before turning back. Yan Feng was standing now, his silhouette cutting a daunting figure against the backdrop of Xiao's mismatched kitchen cabinets. Mr. Yan, please. Lu Han has a filter that's been broken since the 3rd grade. I'm not. I don't. I'm a freelancer. I work for my money. Yan Feng adjusted his cuffs, his expression unreadable. I see. And the space daddy routine. The accidental run-ins. The child who just happens to tackle the wealthiest man in the building. Xiao felt a sting of genuine hurt. Mochi is 4. He doesn't know what a CEO is. He likes your watch because it looks like a compass from his favorite book. If I wanted to catch a rich man, I'd probably wear something without a coffee stain on it. Yan Feng looked at the brown smudge on Xiao's gray hoodie. He looked at the modest, clean, but cramped apartment. Then he looked at Mochi, who was currently trying to feed a piece of macaroni to a stuffed dinosaur. My grandmother, Yan Feng said abruptly, is convinced I am a cold, unfeeling machine. She believes that if I don't produce an heir, or at least a stable partner, within the year, I'm unfit to remain as chairman. Xiao blinked. Okay, that sounds like a rich person problem. I fail to see how that involves my macaroni. She's coming to the city next week to inspect my life. Yan Feng stepped closer, his shadow falling over Xiao. You need a stable income. I need a humanizing element. You have a child who already calls me daddy, and a best friend who thinks I'm a sugar daddy. Why not make the fiction functional? You're proposing a contract. Xiao whispered, his heart hammering against his ribs. A professional arrangement, Yan Feng corrected. I provide a stipend for your time and Mochi's education. In exchange, you and the boy spend 3 evenings a week at the penthouse. You'll be my partner for the duration of my grandmother's visit. Xiao stared at the business card still sitting on the counter. This was insane. This was a manhua trope come to life. And what happens when she leaves? Yan Feng's gaze softened for a fraction of a second as he looked at Mochi. Then the space dad goes back to the moon. And you get a check that pays off your lease for the next 5 years. Chapter 5. The first lesson in luxury. The contract was signed 48 hours later. Lin Xiao felt like he had sold his soul, but then he looked at the educational fund deposit in his bank account and realized his soul was apparently worth a lot of gold leaf tuition. Rule number 1, Yan Feng said, pacing the length of his obsidian-floored living room. No hoodies. My partner doesn't wear things with property of State University printed on them. It's vintage, Xiao protested, tugging at his sleeves. It's a rag, Yan Feng countered. He signaled to his assistant, a terrifyingly efficient woman named Secretary Kim, who wheeled in a rack of clothes that cost more than Xiao's car. We start the immersion tonight, Yan Feng continued. My grandmother's flight was moved up. She's coming for dinner. Here, he tossed a small, velvet box to Xiao. Inside was a silver band set with a single, understated diamond. Is this a ring? Xiao felt his throat go dry. It's a prop, Yan Feng said firmly, though he wouldn't meet Xiao's eyes. Wear it on your left hand. And for heaven's sake, tell Mochi not to mention the space dad thing. He needs to call me father, or Yan. Mochi, who was busy testing the bounciness of the $20,000 Italian leather sofa, looked up. Can I call you Papa Yan? Yan Feng paused. I suppose that's acceptable. The doorbell rang. The heavy, resonant chime of the penthouse felt like a death knell. Remember, Yan Feng whispered, leaning down so his lips were inches from Xiao's ear, we've been together for 2 years. We met at an art gallery. You're the light of my life. Try not to look like you're about to vomit. I'll try, Xiao choked out, if you try to look like you actually know my last name. The doors opened to reveal a tiny, sharp-eyed woman in a silk hanbok, clutching a cane like a weapon. Madame Yan scanned the room, her gaze landing on Xiao, then the ring, then the child on the sofa. So, she barked, this is the scandal I've heard so much about. The dining room of the penthouse was a cathedral of glass and cold stone, but the atmosphere was even chillier as Madame Yan took her seat at the head of the table. Lin Xiao felt like a rabbit sitting down to dinner with a fox wearing very expensive pearls. Chapter 6. The Legend of the Star Candy. The meal was an intricate parade of dishes Xiao couldn't pronounce. He spent most of the first course terrified that he would use the wrong fork and accidentally declare war on a small nation. So, Lin Xiao, Madame Yan began, her voice like clicking bamboo. My grandson tells me you are an artist. A freelance one. In my day, we called that unemployed. Grandmother, Yan Feng warned, his voice low. It's all right, Xiao said, forcing a smile that felt brittle. I specialize in children's book illustrations. It's a different kind of stability. It allows me to be present for Mochi. Madame Yan turned her sharp gaze to Mochi, who was currently trying to use a silver spoon as a catapult for a pea. And the boy, Feng says you've been together for 2 years. Yet, I see no photos of the 3 of you in the social columns. My grandson is usually a magnet for photographers. Yan Feng reached across the table, his hand covering Xiao's. His skin was warm, and for a second, the contact felt startlingly real. We kept it private, grandmother. For Mochi's sake. I didn't want him growing up in a flashbulb. The old woman huffed, clearly unconvinced. Privacy is one thing. Secrecy is another. A child knows when a man is a prop, and when a man is a father. Tell me, little one, she leaned toward Mochi, has this, Papa Yan, of yours always been around? Xiao's heart stopped. This was it. Mochi was a truth-telling machine, and the machine was about to self-destruct. Mochi swallowed his pea and looked at the scary lady with the big bun. Papa Yan was on the moon, he said solemnly. Madame Yan's eyebrows shot up. The moon. Yan Feng squeezed Xiao's hand so hard it went numb. He opened his mouth to intercept, but Mochi continued, his voice bright and earnest. He had to go far away to get the stars, Mochi explained, waving his small hands. But he sent me messages in my dreams. And then, at the park, I found him. He was wearing his boss disguise so the aliens wouldn't find him. He gave me a hug and wiped chocolate off my face. He didn't even care that his fancy pants got dirty. Mochi looked at Yan Feng with pure, unadulterated adoration. He's the bestest space dad. He promised to bring me star candies every night. The silence that followed was heavy. Xiao looked at Yan Feng, expecting to see him cringing at the absurdity. Instead, the CEO was staring at Mochi, his throat moving as he swallowed hard. I did, Yan Feng murmured, his voice sounding uncharacteristically thick. I did promise that. Madame Yan softened. Only a fraction, but the predatory sharpness left her eyes. He didn't care about his pants. Feng, you once fired a driver for spilling a latte on your shoes. People change, grandmother, Yan Feng said, finally looking up. He didn't let go of Xiao's hand. Sometimes, you realize that a chocolate smudge is more important than a suit. Chapter 7. The Moonlight Truth. After Madame Yan retired to the guest suite, declaring she was exhausted by the whimsy, the penthouse returned to its quiet, echoing state. Xiao was in the kitchen, washing Mochi's plastic travel cup, when he felt a presence behind him. Yan Feng was leaning against the marble island, his tie loosened and his jacket gone. He looked less like a CEO and more like the man Xiao had met at the playground. You don't have to keep the act up, Xiao said quietly, not turning around. She's asleep. I wasn't acting, Yan Feng said. Xiao paused, the soapy sponge hovering over the cup. The chocolate smudge. Comment. That was a nice touch for her. Very. Manhua lead. Of you. I wasn't talking about her. Yan Feng walked closer, stopping just a few inches away. When the boy spoke about the moon, about me being space dad, for a moment, I actually felt like I had been missing. Like I had been away somewhere cold, and coming to this kitchen was the first time I'd been home. Xiao turned around, his heart doing a strange, frantic little dance. Mr. Yan Feng, the other man corrected. In this house, at this hour, it's just Feng. He reached out, his thumb brushing a stray drop of water off Xiao's cheek. The air between them felt charged, like the moments before a summer storm. Xiao knew he should pull away. This was a contract. This was business. But then, the door to the hallway creaked open. Mochi stood there, rubbing his eyes and clutching his stuffed dinosaur. Papa, I had a bad dream about the moon aliens. Without a second thought, Yan Feng stepped past Xiao. He knelt on the hard floor, opened his arms, and let the small boy crash into his chest. It's okay, Mochi, Yan Feng whispered, his voice steady and warm. The aliens can't get past the CEO. Go back to sleep. I'll be right here. Xiao watched them, a terrifying realization dawning on him. The contract had a clause for ending the relationship, but it didn't have a clause for what to do if he actually fell for the space dad. The contract was supposed to be a shield, but as the champagne bubbles tickled Lin Xiao's nose, it felt more like a flimsy paper wall. Chapter 8. The Gala and the Golden Liquid. The Yan Group Annual Gala was a sea of black ties, silk gowns, and people who looked like they had never eaten a carb in their lives. Lin Xiao, squeezed into a bespoke navy suit that felt like a second skin, stood by the fountain, clutching his fourth glass of vintage Bollinger. You look like you're plotting a heist, a low voice vibrated near his ear. Xiao jumped, nearly sloshing champagne onto his lapel. Yan Feng stood there, looking devastatingly handsome. He had a way of wearing a tuxedo that made every other man in the room look like they were playing dress-up. I'm plotting my escape, Xiao muttered, his words slightly rounder at the edges than usual. Everyone is looking at me like I'm a specimen in a jar. Oh. Look at the little artist the CEO picked up. Is he a charity project? Is he a midlife crisis? Xiao, Yan Feng said, his hand finding the small of Xiao's back. Ignore them. Easy for you to say. You're the king of the moon. Xiao laughed, a bit too loudly. He took another long sip. You're so symmetrical. It's annoying. Do you even have a pulse, or is it just a very expensive Swiss movement in there? Yan Feng's grip tightened slightly. I think you've had enough, Lin Xiao. Let's get you home before you start telling the board members about Mochi's dinosaur collection. Chapter 9. The Truth in the Taxi. The ride back to the penthouse was a blur of city lights and leather seats. Xiao was leaning his head against the cool window, watching the neon signs smear into long ribbons of color. You know, Xiao said suddenly, his voice small and dangerously honest. Mochi really loves you. He actually thinks you're a hero. He draws you with a cape now. Yan Feng sat in the shadows of the backseat, his face unreadable. He's a child. He'll grow out of it. Quote, and what about me? Xiao turned, his eyes bright with a mix of intoxication and something much more painful. Am I supposed to grow out of it too? You pay me to be your partner. You pay me to hold your hand in front of your grandmother. But then you look at me like I'm the only person in the room. And I forget that there's a check waiting for me at the end of the month. The car hit a bump, and Xiao tumbled toward Yan Feng. Instead of pushing him back, Yan Feng caught him, pulling him flush against his chest. You have a stony heart, Feng, Xiao whispered against his neck. It's all spreadsheets and mergers. You're going to break that kid's heart when the space dad goes back to the moon. And you're going to break mine. Yan Feng's breath hitched. He tilted Xiao's chin up, forcing him to meet his gaze. The CEO's eyes weren't cold anymore. They were burning. Do you really think I'm that good of an actor? Yan Feng's voice was a ragged growl. Do you think I spend every Saturday at a puppet show and eat octopus-shaped hot dogs because it's in the contract? Then why? Because I'm terrified, Yan Feng confessed, his forehead dropping to rest against Xiao's. I've spent 30 years building a life where nothing can hurt me because nothing matters. And then a 4-year-old tackled my leg and a messy illustrator yelled at me about a trash chute, and suddenly, I'm not in control anymore. Before Xiao could process the words, Yan Feng's lips were on his. It wasn't a contractual kiss. It was desperate, flavored with champagne and months of repressed longing. It was the sound of a stone heart cracking wide open. Chapter 10. The morning after. Xiao woke up with a headache that felt like a drum circle was happening inside his skull. He was in the penthouse's guest room, tucked under a silk duvet. Memory hit him like a freight train. The gala, the taxi, the kiss. He scrambled out of bed, his heart hammering. He needed to find Mochi and run. He couldn't face Yan Feng after that. He had violated the professionalism clause in the most spectacular way possible. He stumbled into the kitchen, only to stop dead. Yan Feng was there. He wasn't in a suit. He was wearing an apron over a t-shirt. He was carefully flipping a pancake. Mochi was sitting on the counter, wearing his dinosaur ears, helping by shaking a bottle of sprinkles. Papa, look, Papa. Yan made a star pancake. Mochi cheered. Yan Feng turned. He looked tired, but when he saw Xiao, a slow, tentative smile spread across his face, the kind of smile a man wears when he's finally found his way home. I didn't go back to the moon, Yan Feng said softly. He walked over to Xiao, holding out a mug of coffee. I checked the contract this morning. There's no clause for what happens if the CEO falls in love with the consultant. Xiao took the mug, his fingers brushing Yan Feng's. So, what do we do? Yan Feng leaned in, kissing Xiao's forehead right in front of the sprinkles and the pancakes. We write a new one. This time, there's no expiration date. 2 years later, the glass-walled penthouse had undergone a radical transformation. The obsidian floors were now mostly covered by colorful foam play mats, and the minimalist designer vases had been replaced by unbreakable, acrylic ones. The epilogue. Expanding the galaxy. Yan Feng sat at his reclaimed wood desk, now featuring a dedicated corner for Mochi's office, trying to review a merger agreement. He was interrupted by a familiar weight hitting his thigh. Mochi, now 6 and losing his front teeth, looked up with a very serious expression. Papa Yan, we need to talk about the moon. Feng sighed, leaning back and pulling the boy onto his lap. Is Space Dad being called back to duty? Because your other papa has a deadline, and I'm supposed to be making pasta tonight. No, Mochi said, his eyes wide. The moon is lonely. It only has 1 star. I think we need a little star. From the doorway, Lin Xiao leaned against the frame, a smudge of charcoal on his cheek and a soft smile on his lips. He had traded his paint-stained hoodies for slightly nicer sweaters, but he still looked like the chaotic artist who had captured the CEO's heart in a trash chute hallway. A little star, ha! Xiao walked over, resting his hand on Feng's shoulder. The silver band on his finger caught the afternoon light. Mochi, do you have any idea how much work a little star is? They cry, they don't sleep, and they definitely don't appreciate Space Dad stories for at least a year. I'll teach them, Mochi insisted. I can share my dinosaurs. Except the T-Rex. That's for big kids. Feng looked up at Xiao, his gaze searching. They had talked about this in whispers late at night, about adoption, about surrogacy, about what it meant to grow the family they had accidentally built. I think, Feng said, his voice dropping into that rich, steady tone that always made Xiao's heart skip, that the Yan group can handle one more executive. Or at least one more person to tackle my legs at the playground. Xiao laughed, leaning down to press a kiss to the top of Feng's head. You just want an excuse to buy more miniature suits. Maybe, Feng admitted, pulling Xiao closer until they were one tangled mess of family. But mostly, I just want our galaxy to be a little more crowded. 3 years later, the playground was exactly the same creaky swings, the same wood chips, and the same golden afternoon sun. Lin Xiao sat on a bench, watching Mochi, now a confident second grader, patiently showing a toddler how to use the slide. Next to Xiao, Yan Feng was awkwardly trying to balance a diaper bag on one shoulder while holding a tiny, sleeping girl wrapped in a soft pink blanket. She looks just like you when she's grumpy, Xiao teased, nudging Feng with his elbow. She is not grumpy. She is strategizing her next nap, Feng countered, though he looked down at the baby with a tenderness that would have shocked his old board of directors. A young father nearby was currently chasing a screaming toddler through the sand, looking exhausted and overwhelmed. He caught Feng's eye, the sight of a man in a perfectly tailored coat expertly shushing a baby, and looked away in envy. Do you remember? Xiao whispered, watching the scene. The first time he called you, Daddy, right here. Feng shifted the baby, his eyes drifting to the spot near the slides where his life had fundamentally shifted. I remember thinking my trousers were ruined. And now, Feng reached out, taking Xiao's hand and squeezing it tight. The CEO, the artist, the big brother, and the little star. Now, Feng said, I think I'd let her ruin every suit I own if it meant staying right here.
The Space Dad wasn't on the moon anymore. He was exactly where he was meant to be.